Hello, lovely to be here, and thank you, Annie, for inviting me. Today, I'm going to be talking about the Care Experience and Culture Archive, a little about my PhD thesis here, whilst trying to answer some of Annie's questions. The archive was set up by Dr. Dee Michelle and myself in 2020. We're both scholars using our lived experience of care. I think for us, there was an element of sharing collective knowledge, almost as if our childhood reading had prepared us for this. Representing the care experience community has, for me, meant being validated as a care experience researcher by using difference as a superpower. Dee and I met online in 2018 over a shared passion for stories featuring care experience characters. Our collaboration grew after meeting at the aptly named Foundling Museum in 2019. Dee was on her way to the Care Experience Conference, and I was due to follow, where we met again when Dee chaired a presentation by myself and author Kirsty Capes, who wrote Careless. Care Experience and Culture was established in response to the stigmatization and discrimination faced by children, young people, and adults in and from the care system. Our definition of care experience includes statutory provisions as well as informal arrangements made through friends, family, for children living in foster, residential, or kinship care, and children who've been adopted. We secured funding from the Welland Trust to create a digital archive, building on our existing work, focusing on mine mainly British and Dee's mostly Australian stories of care experience characters and individuals in creative fields. The archive was launched in April 2021 during the inaugural Care Experience History Month. Despite occasional success stories, the predominant narrative surrounding care experience individuals often focuses on their overrepresentation in prison, mental ill health, and homelessness. By shifting this narrative, the archive aims to celebrate the creativity and ingenuity of care experience people, highlighting their contributions to literature, art, and culture. So now I'm going to show you just a few examples from the archive. So you can see that carousel. I update. We update that and change it and feature certain books, actresses, artists, etc. So here we are looking at actors. Did you know that Kathy Burke, who was born in London, when she was just 2, her mother died of cancer, and Kathy was fostered for 4 years by neighbours. That's a real sort of community upbringing there. She's appeared in too many films to list here, as well as nominated for a few BAFTAs and won various awards. Autobiography and memoir, like Letters to Gil, which tells the story of Gil Scott Heron, who an American who had been in kinship care as a child, and he mentored a young Malik Al-Nazir. Malik was born to a Welsh mother and Guyanese father, and taken into care when he was 9 after his father was paralysed. He later sued the government for the way he was treated when in care. Here you can see children's non-fiction. Some rather lovely books there. We also have a blog, which you can just see there. There's a link there. And we welcome anyone who wants to write for the archive, as long as it relates to care experience and mainly representation, but we're also open to suggestions. And there is a suggestions page if you'd like us to add something, which is just there. You just click on that link there. Anyway, I hope that gives you an idea of some of the things that we feature. So now, how does the archive link with my PhD? And which came first, the archive or the story? Excuse me. I was already working on the PhD before we started the archive and had already started writing a novel. my PhD is creative. One link is that where possible in the commentary, of, of the PhD, the thesis, I privilege the voices of care experienced scholars, writers, and artists. I wanted to illustrate the diverse scholarship of care experienced researchers already in the field and whose work is created through their unique lens. I was looking earlier on today, and there are so many, too many for me to list here, but people like Sally Bailey, she's a writer and has written a fabulous book, Girl with Dove. Obviously, Lem Sisse, we have to mention him. Lisa Cherry, Zachary Duncalf, Phil Frampton, Anne Harrison, who's written a wonderful autobiography. Jackie Kay, I would think most people know her, poet. Josie Pierce, who's here today. Paolo Hewitt, Kat Hugman. I should stop. So Heareth takes place between 1974 and 1976 and is narrated in third person limited. The prologue introduces Mare, a young unmarried Welsh woman who in April 1958 gives birth to a baby girl at the summit of Snowdon, only to be forced later to give her up for adoption. The narrative then shifts to 1974, following 16-year-old Marianne as she leaves a children's home in Muswell Hill, where she has spent the last 8 years. The creative practice also includes a collection of imagined postcards. I'm just going to show you. No, actually, I think I'll leave that to the very end. Marianne's boyfriends represent the music genres of the time, and chapter titles are drawn from popular songs. So it's a very musical novel. Family figures are symbolically represented by cultural icons, enriching the novel's exploration of identity and belonging. It was as I expect you're wondering what the danger of the single story is. It was as I started the PhD that I had a sort of epiphany. I happened upon Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's TED Talk, The Danger of a Single Story. Adichie speaks of how she wrote stories as a child of characters who were white and blue-eyed and who drank a lot of ginger beer, lashings of the stuff, apparently, because she was only exposed to foreign characters. Leaving Nigeria and going to university in the United States, she spoke of how her roommate had felt sorry for her because she too had a single story about Africa as one of catastrophe. I saw the talk through a care experience lens and the single story often told about children in care, one of stereotyping, stigma, and criminalization. Adichie says, show people as one thing, as only one thing, over and over again, and that is what they will become. It was this view, Adichie's single story about stereotypes, that gave growth to the idea of a care experience lens, which slowly evolved and began to change my perception of some of the fiction I had previously read. It was a glorious moment, and as it was also the start of thinking of how, as a researcher with the experience of care, I saw the world differently, and especially when it came to representation, stigma, stereotypes, and injustice. Applying a care experience lens brings forward perspectives that challenge readers to engage with themes of empathy, justice, and the need for systematic change, making it a valuable tool in both literary analysis and broader social discourse. Through this lens, readers can appreciate the complexity of care experience characters and recognise the diversity of narratives that reflect real-world struggles, resilience, and hope. I know that's not a favourite word of some people, resilience. Hira seeks to challenge stereotypical portrayals of young people in care, foster empathy, and explore how my childhood experiences shape my creative process as both a reader and a writer. I use a care experience lens to reflect on the protagonist's journey, my own journey, and wider cultural representations in contemporary literature by analysing whether they reinforce or challenge stereotypes. A care experience lens places care experience at the heart of this commentary. In this instance, it is Marianne, the protagonist of Heareth, whose journey is seen from her perspective. I look mainly at contemporary post-1970s representations of orphans, which I describe as a new subgenre of the orphan character field, literature with care experience characters. Within this subgenre are writers, for example, Jenny Fagan, Alex Wheatle, Kirsty Capes, Louise Allen, who through the lens of their lived care experience write fictional and autobiographical stories, and those who are not at care experienced, for example, Jane Rogers, Sarah Stovall, and Mark Hill. We only have time to look at one of these, The Home by Sarah Stovall, categorized as a psychological thriller, portrays her young people in care in a very stereotypical way. The three girls in the home are described as having violent and disturbing pasts. They have been given up on by foster carers, and even Santa can't be bothered with kids in care. The descriptions of the young girls are overdone. For example, Lara, who has lived in many foster homes, hisses like a cat if anyone came near her, or Mad Hope, who is arrested for murder. Helen, the woman who runs the home, says catastrophe followed these children, or perhaps it was true to say catastrophe was part of them. It was their foundation, their brains were wired for it. They could no more avoid it than other children could avoid love. Through the care experience lens, we see a perspective that displays two sets of children, those that are loved and those that are othered. It's interesting how many crime writers who use this trope imagine young care experienced people to be. Every care character in the home has a miserable life with no hopeful outcome, portraying a system which only produces damaged stereotypes. Looking through the lens, we see The Home by Sarah Stovall relies on harmful stereotypes, portraying care experienced individuals as inherently violent or damaged. The characters' behaviours are sensationalised, while statements like their brains were wired for catastrophe reinforce the idea that they are fundamentally othered, damaged. This narrative perpetuates stigma, ignoring systematic failures and the potential for resilience and transformation. Instead of offering nuanced, empathetic portrayals, the novel reduces care experienced individuals to damaging tropes, missing an opportunity to challenge stereotypes and highlight their complexity and strength. I explore this damaged representation with Marianne, who is assessed at 8 years old by a psychiatrist who decides she will be incapable of long-term intimate relationships. These reports follow a child around the care system and influence the way future staff and social workers see a child, and obviously foster carers. To challenge this stereotype, Marianne is portrayed as more than capable of having relationships with many staff, social workers, friends, and boyfriends. It is the staff and social workers who leave her, and not forgetting how children themselves are moved around like pawns in a national game of chess. Writing about some of my lived experience, analysing care experience literature, using a care experience lens to reflect on what I have discovered, Marianne's journey and my own research has enabled me to begin to understand how I became the person I am, and led me to question the influences on the journey of care leavers without supportive parents. Who will parent these children? Who will hold them? How will they survive? I wanted to use the novel to explore alternative ways of surviving the care system without family or friends, without anyone. Unfortunately, that is a stark reality for some young people abandoned by the state, some of whom do not survive and do not have a good enough life. Here challenges the idea that if you do not have parents and are put into care, you are damaged. I took everything away from Marianne so that she would find ways within herself to sculpt the beginnings of a good enough life. She does not have parental figures. Her best friend abandons her when they fall out. She has to find ways to cope with heartbreak, and she turns to the thing that has been constant, that has held her ever since she learnt to read, her stories, her alternate literary family, and her postcards, her art, which are used as a therapeutic support. And while doing all of this, she learns to form new, sustaining relationships in the house of happy endings. I thought I would end with a couple of short extracts from the novel, and this is about postcards. There was nothing more exciting than receiving a postcard through the post. She would look at the stamp to see if it had been posted in England or abroad. What secret messages, gems might it hold? Finally, it was the love or wishes. Sometimes the postcards were funny, like the one from Helen, her best friend from school, who she now worked with at the bank. Helen had sent one of a matador. "This is Randy, he is yours, I will send him to you." And Marianne had laughed. And she bet that Helen had laughed too when she had written it. She bet she had pissed herself laughing because that was what she always did. Postcards create a conscious connection either from the person sending them or with the person receiving them. They know the sender has been thinking about them and taken time over it. It was normal practice in the 1970s to send postcards. And when friends went on holiday, there was a sort of expectation of receiving one, an act of remembrance. And for a few moments, Marianne could be wherever the friend was, living vicariously, experiencing a few moments of a family holiday. And now her growing ephemera collection from friends, an old foster mum, and even a member of staff who used to work there was safely packed in a huge brown envelope in her suitcase. And of course, in there were the postcards to her mother. Obviously, she couldn't really post them. That would be silly. She didn't have an address. Writing to her mother was a bit like writing to Father Christmas. She thought of the postcard with the orange of the robin's breast created with lentils. That had been over 8 years ago. The first Christmas at Saturn Road, and the first postcard she had really posted in the postbox on the corner of the road. Mrs. M for mother, second star to the right, the universe. Dear Mummy, wherever you are, I wish you a very Merry Christmas. Love your daughter, Marianne. Every time the letterbox rattled, she would run to the front door, heart pumping, and check, just in case there had been a miracle. Imagine that. Another Christmas miracle. Thank you.